off, so once we get that figured out, then of course we'll give you that information. But we're going to proceed in that way. So we'll be looking here at the act of creation. We'll be looking at the fall. We'll be looking at the development of nations, and then we'll focus on the person of Abraham and God. Abraham, and we'll be able to grasp from this book not only what happened at the beginning, but why things are the way they are today. And this book, although it deals with those things, is not impractical. It really does provide answers that you and I need to be able to, first of all, develop a relationship with God, but also to understand the world that is around us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as we look at the book, one of the things that we want to accomplish or see happen is that we would look at the magnitude of what God shared here and stand in awe of Him. I mean, this book really should grip your heart and open your eyes to the grandeur of God, to the majesty of God, to the greatness of God. We'll also look and see, try to grasp the plan of God, the purpose of God. Why did He make us? I mean, these are some of the questions that men ask throughout the ages, and men have asked, and men have developed elaborate systems, right? Because why are we here? What's the purpose? Well, the book of Genesis lays these things out for us, and we're able to sit back and take it in and find out who and why we're here. And that's another part of this. Who am I? Why am I here? Why is there something, this is one of the great philosophical questions, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is something here rather than nothing being here? It's a very big question. The heart and the mind and the power and the love of a sovereign God, a God who rules over everything that He has made. We'll be able to see all of these seeds in the book of Genesis. We'll understand origin and purpose and identity. In our well, not so much in our generation, but in the younger people's generation, there is a huge identity crisis. People don't know who they are. If you just briefly, I'm not going to go into it, but just the whole idea of sexual confusion and people not being able to look in the mirror and know, am I a male or am I a female or am I something in between, or identity. Identity has been almost obliterated, but God has given us His word that shows us exactly who are, so that our identity is intact. Even though our minds may create great speculations about things, God keeps us intact. Things may come into the mind, but when we have this outline of God, this map, if you will, we're able to keep our course. We're able to continue to be who God has meant us to be. So I'm praying that as we go through this, it will stir your hearts, and those things that we touch that really stir you up to dig a little bit deeper, that you'll dig a little bit deeper. And that's why I said, I'm not looking to give you all details. I'm not looking to go verse by verse and dig through it. What I'm looking to do is highlight these different things that are found in the book of Genesis. And when those things touch your heart, that you would say, I want to find out more about that. I want to understand that more. Because you'll begin to see that a lot of questions that human beings have are answered in the very, very first book of the Bible. And one of the things that I want us to understand also is that the book of Genesis does not stand alone. The book of Genesis was actually written as a part of other books. Does anybody know what the first section of the Bible is referred to?
Pentateuch.
The Pentateuch? or the Torah, or the law, right? It's different ways. The Christians, we normally call it the Pentateuch, right? First 5 books of the Bible. Penta in the Greek is 5, right? So it's a library of 5 books that were given by God directly, probably in the mountain, by God directly, and which describe what happened, what He did to bring everything that is into being. So we can't really ever overestimate the importance of the book of Genesis. It's not an irrelevant book. You know, some people look at it, it's the first book of the Bible, it's done, it's in the Old Testament. Why look at it? Why look at it? Because all the seeds of whatever we see throughout the Bible, including the New Testament, are found right there in the beginning, in seed form. And it's just absolutely amazing how you see God dropping seeds here, dropping seeds there, dropping seeds there, and then developing those themes throughout the rest of the Bible, throughout the historical periods, within the wisdom literature that we have. And the wisdom literature would include the Psalms and the Proverbs and things like that, where God goes on and He's developing all of these themes, and then He gets to the prophets, and you see this application of everything that you find in the book of Genesis, because the prophets get face to face. The prophets, you know, they are in your face. The prophets are always calling people's hearts back to God, and they're constantly reminding the people who God is. And they're often calling them back to look, the Creator. You look through the book of Isaiah, for example, and he talks about the fact that God is the Creator over and over and over and over and over again. And God says things like the old things are done. Behold, I create new things. I make new things. You know, sometimes we think that God created one time and He's done creating. No, He's a creator, and He's an eternal creator. This is God. So that theme constantly comes up throughout the scriptures, and it will give us a foundation to be able to understand it. So in it, God tells us not only what happened, but how we got to where we are in history right now. He doesn't just say, well, I made the earth, and this is how I made the earth, and boom, that's it. No, He also tells us why there is this weird mix in life. Why there is sorrow, and why there is happiness, why there is joy, and why there is pain, and why is there this mix? When in the first chapters God said He created all this beauty, and He said, behold, it is what? It is good. And then the next thing you know, ruin. It gives us real answers to understand the complexity of life. And that God's not schizophrenic. He didn't create, His original intent was not what we live out today. And we all know that. And we all know there's something wrong in the world. There's something that's not right. There's something that's off. We have this internal knowing and sense. Even without studying the Bible, this just it's not right. Something's goofy. Something's off here. And Genesis responds to that unknowing in the heart of man. Because in the heart of man, there's this desire for peace, like Pastor Mike was talking about, shalom, in the broad sense of it, where there is wholeness. We don't understand why are things so broken. Because there's this craving for wholeness, and we want wholeness. We don't want broken relationships. We don't want a broken world. We want a whole world. We want the best that there can possibly be. Well, that can only come if you have an image that good is a true thing. If there were no image of good being a true thing, in other words, that God created all things good, there would be no attempt to work in our lives to move us or to progress us towards the good. So the old vision becomes the new vision, and the vision that carries us forward right into the kingdom of God, where all these things and all that we feel and desire in our hearts will actually be about. Get all the way to the book of Genesis, or to the book of Revelation. And the very last thing, God says, I'm going to destroy it all. I'm going to burn it all with fire. And then I'm going to recreate it all. So this is what gives us the opening to understand the things that were and the things that are. It tells us why we were created and by who we are, how we got here, why things are the way they are on earth, and that there is an unseen realm. There's a spider up here. That there is an unseen realm where spiritual beings of light and darkness war to aid or to destroy us. Right there in the book of Genesis, we have a revelation of we're not alone. Now, men have that, right? Men have that. Even men, secular men who do not believe in God, have that sense. We're not alone in the universe. And they reason we can't be the only ones here in this massive universe. We cannot. They reason that way. We cannot possibly be. There has to be what? Alien life forms. Right? Life forms that we're not aware of. Some of us laugh, but do you know that since the early 80s, the U.S. government has spent millions and millions of dollars a year on a radio program where there are antennas out at some desert place in California or something like that. But there are antennas, and they have been trying to receive signals from outer space. We pay for this with our tax money, because the scientific community is convinced that there's someone out there. Well, there is someone out there. There are angels out there.
Amen.
There are demonic forces out there. And this is what God shows us right from the beginning. He pulls the curtain back and he says, you're not the only ones here. There is a warfare that is going on. There is a struggle between good and evil, which is one of the things, of course, that just crushes us intellectually, trying to understand, oh my God, how can this be? There's so much good, but yet there's so much evil. When our hearts rise one day in almost a euphoria of life and enjoyment, only to be crushed the next day by a spell of depression or anxiety or worry, or how is it? What? You begin to feel, this almost a schizophrenia, a dividing of the heart. One day I'm this, and the next day I'm that. What do they call that today? Don't you say bipolar? I'm bipolar. No, you're just caught in the throes. You're caught in the midst. You're caught in the middle, and you don't understand what's going on and the forces that are being waged against you to make you feel this way or that. The book of Genesis is the opening that gives us to understand what is going on more than skin deep. What is going on beyond what the eye can see, what the hand can feel, what the ear can hear. So it opens it up and really shows us right from the beginning. So it explains our origins and the ethnic development of people and nations and languages. Do you know that at one time the earth only had one language? Mm-hmm. There was only one language. And the earth was unified at a place called Babel. And they had an intent to build a tower to heaven. And God looked down and said, wow, nothing will be restrained to them. They're of one heart, of one mind. They can communicate to one another. I'm going to have to go down and mess them up. and he didn't do it with nuclear bombs. He did it simply by confusing languages. Actually, if you say confusing languages, it's really different. He added languages. He added languages. And then all of a sudden, you were talking to one person that now you looked at it and you didn't understand anything they said. But then there was a group that God wanted you to belong to, and you understood exactly what all those people were talking about. And by that, he caused them to fulfill what he had told them to do, to disperse and to go inhabit all the different parts of the world. So it gives us an explanation as to why, because that's linguists don't understand why are there all these languages. And if you get into language, you understand that language is central to life. It is very difficult if you can't speak the language of the person next to you. Go live in a foreign country. I've done this. Different time. You go there and you all you want is a hot dog. This one. No. And you can't even say no, not that one. Now, how easy is that to say no, not that one, the other one? But if you can't speak that language, they're not going to get your hand gestures all the time. Sometimes they might. You see what I'm saying? It's important. And God shows us the importance of it, and He shows us why things are the way they are today. So we learn of the presence of good and evil, beauty and ugliness, the burning desire for joy and peace, while hate, violence, and war are all around us. I mean, our little time here in the United States over the last 5 months has brought all these things right to the surface. They're always there. All this rage and anger and frustration, it's always there. You just need something to burst the little bubble and it comes up. And the strangest thing is that all these people that are doing all this ruckus, all they say is, all we want is peace.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, wait, do you see what you're doing here? This is not peace. Well, there can't be peace without justice. Which is a true statement. You do have to have justice, equalities, if there's going to be any kind of an abiding, true peace. But we know that there's so much corruption that there's never going to be shalom on this earth. One guy that I like real well, he's an economist, his name's Thomas Sowell. And he said there's no such thing as utopia, it's just trade-offs. In other words, you give me a little bit, I give you a little bit. Nobody walks away from the table fully satisfied. Nobody. Everybody walks away wanting a little bit more. And that's just the way things are in this world. And so the book of Genesis shines on that. It speaks to that condition in which we live, and it gives us some real answers for it. So we understand the need for loving community, though unity is extremely elusive. And once you do get it, it's very difficult to maintain it. Even within churches, you see, unfortunately, you see churches split, one half of the church goes that way, the other half goes this way. Something happened, it blew up, and blah, blah, blah. Holding on to that is a very difficult thing. We learn why eternity is always on our minds and why our hearts always feel half empty and craving more. The great Christian thinker Augustine said that we're restless until we find our rest in Him. We're restless until we find our rest in Him. And a lot of times there's no outward reason why we ought to be restless. It's just that in the inner part, in the inner sanctum, in the inner soul, there's a place that is only for God. It's the seat of human life. And it's made for God. God made us to rule from that place. But since He's not there, our lives are restless. A.W. Tozer said that is the perfect description of human history ever since the fall. Restless man, a wandering man, a wondering man, one who doesn't have answers that he desperately needs. Well, the book of Genesis is given to us to pull that curtain back and show us what God's intents were. So, this book is still today of great importance. And I believe to not only our generation, but even to the younger generation that is coming up, because they're confused and demoralized, because and deconstructive philosophies, things that tell us that we're less than men, and we need to tear down all of our values and the way that we've always lived our lives so that we can advance. I don't know how you can tear down morals and expect to advance, but this is how the theory goes. This is how the theory goes. We'll rebuild it with what? Well, we don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there. The only problem is, whoever tears down becomes the problem. Why? Because there's something wrong, inherently wrong, with you and me. You see how I say that smiling? There's something inherently wrong with us. We're sinners. We're away from God. He's not ruling in that place of the heart, in our will, really. He's not ruling there. We're a stubborn people. We're a rebellious people. And because of our stubbornness, because of our rebellion, it leads us out into these deserts where life becomes a labor to live instead of a pleasure. When we know something on the inside of us tells us, man, it should be better than what it is. How do I reconcile it? You look in the book of Genesis and you read it and you understand, man, this is what's going on. This is why I feel convulsed one way one day and the next day. And we go through these different cycles. This book will help us to recapture our true identity as human beings. Who created us? Why did he create us? For what purpose? Why are things amiss? How can I get back? Can I get back? And that's one of the wonderful things is that although it talks about the beautiful beginning and then the wrecking of the dream, the dream, God's dream, it really became a nightmare. I mean, even to God. We'll get in next week and we'll look at chapter 6 of this book, where it starts to talk about the story of Noah. And God looks on the earth and he says, every imagination of the heart of man is evil from his beginning. He said, it's ruined. I'm just going to destroy it. God actually came to that conclusion when he looked at the interactions of men on the earth at that time. We've become much more inventive in evil, I'm sure, after 4,000 years. But at that time, God said, it's ruined. I can do nothing with it. I'm going to destroy it all. He says, I won't give you too much because I want to get into the whole thing, but I'm grieved at my heart. I'm grieved in the inner part of my being that I created anything because it's destroyed. But then it says, one man found grace. One man amongst all of them was living a life that was pleasing to the Lord. He took that one man. He destroyed everything else. But he restarted the race. It's an amazing story. Absolutely amazing story. But we'll get into that, like I said, later. And but he doesn't leave us, and this is what I like. Right from the beginning, he does not leave us in desperation. He immediately tells Adam and Eve after they sinned. We'll look at this just a little bit later. He immediately tells them somebody's coming who's going to crush the head of that serpent. And then he kills animals, a blood sacrifice. And he clothes the man and the woman who have lost their sense of innocence. They now know guilt when they had not known guilt. Consumed them. Amen?
Amen.
Are you all with me? You're all quiet.
We're here.
Like I said, I'm not going to go in and do a deep cleanse here, a deep, searching out something, but I want to provoke some thoughts. Okay, as we look into the book, that was just, an introduction. But as we look into the book of Genesis, God's side of the beginning story, what we have to realize is it's absolutely impossible to take it all in. You can study this book from sun up to sundown, and you will never take it all in. It's that broad. It's that deep. It's pregnant with knowledge of God. And it takes time. You know, if you think of a gold mine, you know, there are people who work years and years and years in caves and tunnels looking for gold just to find that one vein. And you have to dig for it. And I think that's one of the things that's missing amongst us today. We don't dig for the sweetness of the knowledge of God. Therefore, we don't find it. But as we dig, as we seek, the Bible says, seek and you will find. Spurred on by that promise of Jesus, we can find gems and treasures, spiritual gems and treasures from this book that will truly satisfy our heart and fix our hearts and minds to have a godly perspective and a godly view of everything that is around us, everything that pertains to life. But we have to dig. So I hope to spur that on. I hope to stimulate. So, we're simply not capable of understanding how God did what he did when he created the heavens and the earth. It's not in us. It's too big. And I know that is something that smacks right at our pride, right? I can't understand something. Yes, I can. I can't. Oh, yes, I can. I can do all things. No, you can't. I seriously doubt that you could create a BB out of nothing. A BB, just a very small little BB, even a plastic BB. Try speaking BB into existence. One thing that we have to understand, and I know that in a lot of churches, a lot of areas, the book of Genesis is used to confront scientism, okay, which are the conclusions that men have come to based upon scientific discovery, right? But you can't discover everything from scientific discovery. You can only discover certain things about what is. You can't necessarily discover where it came from and how it was made. Science doesn't have an answer to that. Science has no idea what energy is. Nobody has any idea of what it is, where it comes from, and how it works. We just use it. But nobody gets it. The fact that you have a personality and a dog doesn't, how do you explain that? And please, don't look at, oh no, my dog has a personality. It is in such a small, minute manner that your dog, now if your dog has a personality equal to yours, we need to get you into counseling very fast. Because we need to develop your human person. Now come on, anybody and everybody knows, yes, okay, they look at you, they smile, they go, they do these weird little things, but come on, they don't have anything near the capacity of personality that you have. What about consciousness? How do I know that I'm even here? I'm conscious of that fact. The great philosopher said, I think, therefore I am. Right? But is that true? How do you know you're thinking? There's actually, no, but think about it. There's something behind your thinking. You're actually observing yourself think. Think about it. The only way you can know that you're thinking is because you're observing yourself think. There's something deeper than the thinking process. There's this thing that's called consciousness. Science has no answer.
Oh, that's deep.
They have no idea what it is, where it comes from, how we got it, how we went from this purely biological something to a creature with personality and consciousness. And then if you want to take it to conscience, they're even more lost. We're not lost. We're not lost. You see, people have run with these things, and I'm going to read something to you from the Apostle Paul that will show you exactly why we are where we're at. God says to us, I created you in my image and in my likeness. God is, we can deduce from that, God is a person. All of these theological understandings come from the book of Genesis. Just the fact that God says, in the beginning, God. And I'll get to that in just a second. If we're created like God, then we must have the capacity to communicate. If we have the capacity to communicate, we must be persons. There's somebody inside the flesh. It's not just flesh. It's not just the movement of biological processes. I say something to you because I've thought about what you said. I have formulated what you said, and then I responded. It wasn't just because there's this process totally out of my control that carries me along without any will of mine involved. I exercise a will. God has a will. We have a will. We're not robots. We're not automats. We're not any of that. But there are people who are absolutely convinced that we are. And you look at them and you have to say, poor soul. I'm serious. You have to say, poor soul. You're confused. You're messed up. You're perverse. You're out of reality. You're out of reality. There is a real reality. And then there's everything else. And God gives us real reality. And he says, this is how I made you. If your mind starts to drift from that, bring it back to the standard. Bring it back to what I have said. I created you in my image and in my likeness. I created you male and I created you female. Not something in between. Not something other than. Not something that, oh, I feel like I'm this today. No. I created you this way. X chromosomes, Y chromosomes. You have one or the other. You don't have both. There are very few cases that actually does occur. But the percentage is so minute that it's almost unheard of. So God gives us this course. He sets us on this course for all history. He sets the human mind in a particular, how would I say, a particular flow, a particular groove. He shows us the way in which we were made and the way in which we should walk and how we can live our lives so that we're benefited and that we become a benefit to others because that's how he created us. So it's not a book or a description about how God made it. He doesn't tell us how he made it, except for the fact that he spoke it. He doesn't tell us the math behind it. He doesn't tell us the physics behind it. We can study it, we can look at it, we can say this exists, that exists. We may get parts of it right, most of it is probably completely wrong. If you doubt me on that, simply take this. During this pandemic period, we have had our best scientific minds on display before the public. We have. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. That's actually how science takes place. People are not as clear-minded as you think they are just because they have a PhD next to their name. They have ideas, they have theories, they have thoughts, they have possibilities, but they don't know, and that's what we're seeing. This is completely new, and everybody says, it's this, and then the next day, well, it's not exactly that. And that's the condition of man. And yet we want to look and go, why did you make me the way you made me? Well, I know a little more than you do. You go all the way back to this and you see the grandeur of God, you see the intellect of God, you see the power of God being manifest, and you can say, I can trust myself to him. I understand why everything's wrecked. I can see that it's not this God who is against me. He's actually for me. He actually loves me. He created this beauty for us to enjoy, but there was a wreck and we were a part of it. I can trust him. So that story, it's so important when we get that. Right from the get-go, we understand that when God looked at all he created, he ended each and every time with, it is good. And that will be the major tone and major note, the dominant note of our life. God is good. And all the time, God is good. And that will set your life, that will set your rudder. And it'll allow you to cut through the most high winds, like what we saw today, rains. I was standing there in my bedroom rebuking it in the name of Jesus. Amen. I'm not going to let those winds tear my house apart. Amen. I'm acting like God. He put us here to have dominion over these things. Jesus spoke to the winds. Jesus spoke to the rains. And at times he allows us to do these things. At times. I won't say that he gives us carte blanche. There are times when our faith rises and he hears our voice. And in response, he does these things. So instead of being a science book on creation, it's really a true account of origins. It's a narrative. It's God telling a story that nobody else could possibly tell. For the very reason was, he was the only one who was there. There were other spiritual beings around. But there was a time when there weren't. There was a time when God created angels. They are created at some particular time. It probably wasn't even time because it's eternity. But at some point, God created angels. There was a time when they didn't exist. There was a time when it was just God. And he was just content being God. He doesn't need anybody. He doesn't need us. This is the thing that's very difficult for us to grasp, for us to accept. God doesn't need me, but he loves me. And I think the love is greater than the need. Do you know God will not be ruffled? If we were to all go to hell, if I can put it that way. Why? Because within himself, the Trinity, he's perfect. He has no needs. He has no needs. He didn't need us. He didn't create us out of need. He created us for pleasure. This is what we learn in the book of Genesis. That's the reason. We're created for the pleasure of God, not the other way around. God's not here for your pleasure, for my pleasure. We're here for his pleasure. And when we get back into line with him, then we fulfill our plan and we fulfill our purpose. When we're not pleasing to God, then, of course, there's a problem. There's a difficulty. So, in this account of the origins, we find the Creator telling man, the crown of his creation, about his own story. God telling us where we came from and why. And what. It is history from the only one who could order the events and explain his purposes to a certain extent, right? He can only explain to us what we can grasp, and frankly, a lot of us, most of us really, are pretty dull. And when it gets into the area of the complexity of God's heart and God's mind and all that he sees, he said, my thoughts are much higher than your thoughts. My ways are much higher than your ways. So even if God were to explain to us, take us into a room and sit down and start writing on a chalkboard how he did what he did, most of us would just go, okay, I'm lost. I don't get it. And he said, you don't have to get it. That's right. You don't have to get it. You just have to know who did it and why. And that he has good intentions towards you. It's a trust issue. So God doesn't give us a scientific book. Now, and those facts are true in and of themselves, but it's not given to us as a science textbook. And sometimes I think we maybe put a little bit too much emphasis on that, even though it is speaking truth. So, an example, if you want to understand a building, you do not ask the building to explain its existence or its purpose. Who do you ask? The builder. Because the builder knows why the building was built. The builder knows why there's 2 stories instead of 3 or 4 or 5. The builder knows why it was made in this particular place, why it has this shape and this form, why it has this component or that component, why he has all that. If you were to walk in this building and say, New Life Building, what is New Life Building going to say to you? It's going to say, yeah, nothing. It's just going to say, well, look at me and see if you can figure it out. Right? But God didn't leave us in that hole. Like I said, I'm not anti-science. I'm not. I am anti-scientific arrogance that thinks it has answers beyond what God has given to us, and they don't. Frankly, behind doors, closed doors, they know it. They just won't tell you.
Amen.
They know it. They know they're messed up. But we have the answers. Oh, praise you, Jesus. Okay, so, as we look into the actual text here, and I'm not going to get too much further, because we're just already running out of time. I can't believe it. We look into the very first phrase. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. And you can spend literally an hour thinking about those 4 words. And all that God is communicating to us through those words. For example, in the beginning, there had to be something that predates it. For there to be something, especially something that is so technically marvelous as the earth that we live in, the universe, the solar system, our bodies, the way they operate. I mean, come on. If there's not a design to everything that's around us, and if it all just by itself somehow made itself and then formed us and gave us a mind, nobody behind it, really? I don't even know how you can accept that idea. And you know, if you talk about the theory of evolution way back, it never actually tried to answer the question as to where everything came from. A lot of people think that it's a story of Genesis story. It's not. What it tries to talk about is how we got to where we are through biological processes. It never even attempts the idea of where did it all come from. Nobody has ever an idea of where did it all come from. Some people say, well, it's a parallel universe. Okay, well, then where did that parallel universe come from? Right? And we just keep going on and on. God is saying, before everything, I am. That's what he's saying. Before everything, anything that you can think, anything you can see, anything you can imagine, God was there before. He made it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is loaded with theological knowledge. That is loaded with knowledge about God. He's eternal. He's powerful. He's mighty. He's glorious. He's an intellect that we can't even conceive of. Sometimes we get around people, have fast minds, it's kind of like you get dizzy with them. God is like warp speed. Warp speed. The fact is, he knows everything at once. He doesn't learn. Did you know that? Did you ever think about that? God doesn't learn. He knows everything. Not only does he know everything about everything that exists, because he made everything that exists, he knows everything that's going to happen within the creation that he created. Everything. Doesn't mean that he initiates all of it. He certainly didn't initiate sin. But he knew it was going to happen. And he already had a plan for it.
Yeah.
He's amazing. He's amazing. When you just sit and just think about some of these things, and this is what Genesis opens up to us, the marvelousness of God, the glory of our God. One of the most important phrases in the whole Bible, why? because it puts the emphasis and the focus where it must be, of necessity where it must be, on God himself, and not on the creation. In the beginning, if God was in the beginning the creation, in the beginning man, it would have been like, oh, that's a dud. Anticlimactic, right? Oh. But in the beginning, God? Totally different story. Totally different story. God initiated everything in the material and spiritual world. Both. He did not only create the heavens and the earth, he also created the spiritual realm, as we've already alluded to. God is eternal, without beginning and without end. Now listen to this. He is the uncaused cause of all things, as somebody has said. The uncaused cause. What does that mean? Nobody made him, but he made everything. The uncaused cause. The unmade one who made everything. That's God. The eternal one. The Lord of Lords. The King of Kings. The Sovereign. And all these thoughts about who God is come flooding into our hearts and our mind when we realize God is not bound by this creation. God stands outside of creation. Everything in creation will die. You, me, birds of the air, the grass. It's all going to die. But not God. He stands outside of his creation. He can't die. He can't even die. If he were to die, there would be nothing. Absolutely nothing. But he can't die because he's alive forevermore. And he stands before all things. He is the Lord, the God, the Creator. Sustains it all by the word of his power. The simple but profound statement is the beginning of all true knowledge. In the beginning, God. Beginning of all true knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Without it, you're really lost to comprehend that which is. Without this foundation, this framework, man is nothing but a wanderer and a wild speculator about what is. They have no true idea, no true worldview. Some of you may be familiar with that term, the worldview, a way of looking at the world. From what point do you see the world? That's what philosophies do, right? Philosophies are points of view, ways to, a man sitting here on earth looks, out horizontally at the things, or even up vertically, and tries to create a way of understanding, a view, a prism through which he can look at all the different events and make sense of it. But they fail, always. Always. But the Christian worldview takes into consideration things that go beyond man's reasoning. It takes into consideration what God has said. We call that revelation. God took the curtains back and said, this is what exists. This is the reason for that existence. This is why it's all wrecked. And it brings everything into a landscape that we can look at and comprehend. And that landscape that we see before us ought, if we exercise our reasoning powers truly and correctly, lead us back to the conclusion that God is, and that God is the Creator. If you don't have this, you will go off into even insanity. You will go off into perversion. You will go off into things that man was never meant to get into. Let me read a passage for you out of the book of Romans. Yeah, go all the way to the book of Romans, because Paul talks about the importance of this knowledge that we gain from knowing the fact that God is the creator of all things. Now listen, just if you want to look at it, that's fine. I'm reading out of the NIV Bible. Paul is laying out, right, the gospel, but he refers to the brokenness of man's reason and what it leads him to. In verse 18 of chapter 1, verse 18, Paul says this: the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of men who do what? Who suppress the truth by their wickedness. So God is saying, I'm pouring out my wrath on wicked men who are turning the truth into a lie. Those who flip things around and call truth lies and lies truth, right? Those people, the wrath of God is upon them. And notice how Paul develops. He says, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, you see, what is Paul referring to? For man to be able to truly understand things as they are. He's pointing back to the creator of all things. And without that creator, you don't have an explanation. And if you try to erase the creator, you're going to go into modes of thought that will lead you to perversion. So since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, from where? From the creation of the world. You see what he's saying? The creation, it testifies to who God is. In the beginning, God. What he made speaks of who he is. We ought to draw these proper conclusions. Our minds, because God made them, ought to lead us to the fact of God. We ought to be able to perceive what he says here, the invisible qualities of God, his eternal power, his divine nature. They have been clearly seen, being understood. How? From what has been made. So from the creation, we should be able to look at it and say, there's a designer. And not only is there a designer, there is a powerful, intelligent, personal being who made it all. It didn't just appear. Somehow. He made it and put it into action. And he says, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, empty, vain, useless. Their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. What is he saying? All the idols in the world, the idols that men have made and said, formed it with their own hands, looked at it and said, you're my God. I love how God mocks them in the book of Isaiah. You take a tree. With part of that tree, you make your idol. With another part of that tree, you warm yourself. With another part of that tree, you cook your food. Can't you see what you're doing? All because they didn't want a holy and true and pure God. They loved their sin, so they created an idol that was something they could control. They rejected the true knowledge of God that was perceptible through the creation. And they became futile in their thinking, vain, useless. This is why this information is so vitally important. And you look at the world today and bam, there it is. Get rid of God and you get what we have today.
Amen. That's right.
Years ago, they boldly proclaimed God is what? Dead. That's why the little Christian movie came out. No, God's not dead. He is alive. That was a response to that statement. God is dead. Now, they didn't mean that they killed God. They just meant that they clouded the view so much that no one believes in it anymore. Everybody has become a healthy skeptic. I was talking to my brother-in-law one time about God, just briefly, because they're not religious. And he responded to me, well, the jury's still out. Jury? What, you're the jury? I didn't say anything, I just got to roll my eyes. Okay. Fact of the matter is, you're the accused. And the judge and jury all rolled into one is judging you, not the other way around. But men's minds have become so dull because they have rejected the God who has created all things. Therefore, it says, God gave them over to sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. Sound familiar? They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is blessed, praised forever. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. And here we're talking about, the homosexuality and such. Even their women exchanged the natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relationships with women and were inflamed with lust one for another. Now, if that's not clearly homosexuality, I don't know how to read. And I know how to read. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile, I love this statement, since they didn't think it was worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, He gave them over to a depraved mind. What does that mean? A darkened mind. A mind that cannot set itself on that which is good. A mind that is set on darkness and evil. And that's why God said in chapter 6, I already referred to it, every imagination of the heart of man is evil from his beginning. He gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with all kinds of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, boastful. They invent ways of evil doing. King James just says they're inventors of evil. You ever heard of evil geniuses? There are plenty of them. People whose minds are truly genius, but they're given over to evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Sound like our world? The violence that has filled our world sound a little bit like it. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue. This is the part that really irks me when I see a gay flag flying on the Capitol. They not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. So, when God sees a gay pride march, all He sees is rebellion. And a people rejecting Him. And from the Capitol and from our embassies around the world flying these flags, God is looking. Look what He says about it. All because we did not want to retain the knowledge of God gained through that simple phrase, in the beginning, God. Because it makes us responsible to someone higher than our own perverted desires. It makes us responsible to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Creator of all things. It makes us responsible to Him. And this is why, and Paul uses this to show why God's judgment has been poured out on all humanity. But at the same moment, it demonstrates the goodness of God in that He sent Jesus Christ to bear that wrath upon Himself so that you and I could be forgiven. That's why the cross is really the crux of history. It's right at the center of it. It leads us to understand that we're evil in the sight of God, but it also shows his mercy towards those who will believe and repent and live in unison with him. All these little seeds come from this wonderful book that we're looking at very slowly. We only got to verse 1. We're going to have to speed up quite a bit, but yeah, it's already 8 o'clock, so I don't want to go any farther today because I know that I gave you a lot of information. As we're thinking about that, I mean, I don't know, is there anybody today? Usually I'll have a question or something to throw out to kind of get the conversation, but is there anybody that has a question about something that was said today that maybe you didn't understand, or you have a comment that you wanted to share about that? Just kind of throw that out, in a general manner.
I think it kind of happens to me sometimes is when God created man and woman, why we were given a choice.
Why we were given a choice?
Why we have our free will, free choice. I mean, I know you don't want duplicates, and he didn't want to just have like
Robots?
yeah.
Well, he would probably want us to just love him through our free will.
Yeah.
I get that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I personally think that that's really the crux of it. Why did God give us a will? Why? Well, as a matter of fact, one of the points that I was going to bring up today is when God made everything, he just happened to make that tree. Right? He didn't have to make that tree. And he didn't have to give a command to not eat it. But he did. Why? It's a test, right? It was a test. It was a test. Do you love me or don't you? Do you trust me or don't you? He didn't tempt. You know, James makes it very clear God doesn't tempt anyone. He's never tempted anyone. He never tried to seduce Adam and Eve to take of that fruit. He simply said, the tree's there, don't touch it. That's all he did. But it did create an opportunity. No doubt about that. But it was a test. Will you love God from the heart? What's the great command? What's the greatest commandment? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength, and thy neighbor, right, second one, as thyself. So yeah, God tests. And that's a great lesson, spiritual lesson for all of us. Not just back in the Garden of Eden, but now. You know, when you don't understand, well, God, you know, and the devil comes along and he says, that tree right there, you know, did God say that you're not supposed to eat it? Casting a little doubt. Are you sure? He says that because he knows that if you eat of that tree, look at it. It's a beautiful tree, isn't it? If you eat of that fruit, you're going to be like God. And then Eve said, you know, it's got good fruit. And you know what? It is an attractive tree. And besides that, I will gain a wisdom that will make me like God. Do you trust God? Do you love him to abide in his commandment, or don't you? We're all being tested like that. In our lives here, and I'm thankful for it. Because you want to know what? I don't want any misfits in heaven. Do you? Do you want a misfit in heaven that's going to bring us back to this?
No.
Neither do I. I say, God, test us all. Test us all. Make sure that each and every one of us that proclaims the name of Christ is a true believer. God says, no problem, I got you.
Oh, he does.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If there are no misfits in heaven, why are there guards around the throne of God?
Guards?
Yeah, the seraphim and the...
Seraphim are afraid
Aren't they there?
Yeah, the seraphim are really ministers.
Okay.
Do you really think God needs a guard?
No, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
But it reads that
It
way.
gives, well, it could give you that
Revelation.
impression, you know, that they're there to guard him, but no. When Satan rose up against him, okay, he was the number 1 or number 2 angel, right? Responsible for the worship of God. And he rose up, and he was even able to convince a third of the other angels to rebel with him. Do you think God was caught off guard?
No.
Do you think it took him more than a half a second, probably less than that, to judge him and to strip him and cast him out?
No.
No. There's no power against the power of God. Somehow Satan got it into his head that he could take God out. Somehow. I have no idea.
So
But
they're
no.
just praising God.
Right. Angels, actually, if you look, they're sent to minister to us. They're sent to protect you, right? In spiritual matters and even in physical matters. Sometimes God will have an angel intervene in the physical realm to keep one of his people safe or to deliver something. I mean, the Bible is full. I mean, actually, very interesting that you bring up the angels because they're present right from the get-go. Right? Right from chapter 3. Bam. There's the angels. And when God dispersed... Huh?
When we were created, they were present.
Well, yeah, it doesn't specifically mention them at that point, but it does mention them in chapter 3. The evil angel, right? Satan mentions him. And then when God expels them from the garden after they've fallen, then we see angels again. Guarding the garden so that man could not come back in to partake of the tree of life. See, because it's understood that if they had in that fallen state entered and partaken of that tree of life, that they would have then been sealed for eternity in that fallen state. So God excluded them and allowed them to die.
But you can see where I got that idea.
Yeah, I can see where. Yeah.
I have eyes
Yeah.
all around, and I mean, picturing these
Yeah.
beings, these angels that, you know.
Well, they're tremendous,
Yeah.
but God is more tremendous
So
than all of them.
They're watching, and I had that question for years.
Yeah.
What are they watching?
Yeah. Yes, but they are being sent by God, right, to do things. For example, we're going to see here in the book in chapter 19, God comes down to visit Abraham in chapter 18, and he has some business there to tend to with Abraham, and he's about ready to go down to Sodom. Who are those two guys with him? Angels.
Yeah.
Right? And they go down to Sodom, apparently manifested as men, because these Sodomites wanted to take them out and have sexual relationships with them, which was a heinous thing, obviously. And so they're present, all the way back. In the story of Abraham, Hagar, he was visited by angels on several occasions. So that's why I say you see all of these seeds. This is one of the wonderful things about this book. You see this spiritual realm. You see these tremendous beings, both dark and light, angels of God, and then satanic beings, demons, things like that. They're there. They're already present. So God has, in that book, given us the landscape that we live in, that you can't possibly get from your own power of reasoning. You could never deduce angels. You may think of aliens, but you're not going to think of angels and the battle that goes on between them. Yeah.
And Daniel.
Yeah.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want your, what is the difference between a test and tempting? What is a test?
Okay, well, to be tempted, there has to be a standard, right? And a prohibition. In other words, a law, don't do this. The lawgiver is good in giving the law, right? Because he does not want the person to partake of something that's not good for him. So the law in and of itself is good. Even Paul argued that, right? About the law of God. The law of God is good. And so God made that law for man. But that's it. It was another being, a serpent, possessed by a demonic spirit, who seduced Eve with different ideas so that she would cross the line that God had set. So do you see the difference? The one is simply giving the prohibition. You can't do this. The other is, go ahead and do it. Come on. You know you want to.
So
You see the
there's
difference?
What is testing? How does God test us?
God tests by allowing us to be put into that situation.
So they're
So it's a
connected,
test.
right? The temptation is the beginning of God saying, okay.
No.
No?
The test comes when God gives the command.
Okay.
Okay? He's giving you that command. He expects you to hold that command. Right?
Yeah.
So he's testing you. At the moment he gives that command, he's testing you. Are you fulfill it? Are you going to do it? Because we've been created like him with this will. We can choose against if we choose to. We've all learned that that's not a very good thing, right? I mean, when we choose what we know God has told us not to do, it usually doesn't turn out too good. No, let me rephrase that. It never turns out good. Okay, so God gives us a command, but he doesn't say, okay, now I want you to break that command. So he has tested us by giving us the law. Are you or not? But the temptation is a drawing to break it. That's the difference. Does it make more sense?
Yes.
It's a difficult concept. It's not easy sense. So if you get over into the book of James, right, chapter 1 of James, you read down in verse 12 there, and it talks about the fact that God never, he says he cannot be tempted, and he tempts no one.
And that's kind of what brought me to the question.
Right.
He doesn't tempt you to sin.
Yeah, he never will tempt you to sin. If he were to tempt you to sin, you would sin. If God were to tempt you, you would sin. Right? Because anything God does will succeed. Certainly, if God were to tempt any of us with anything, small, big, doesn't matter, we would sin. We would go against it because, yeah, he knows us. He knows what to say. Just like the enemy, he knows us. Huh? The enemy shoots things into your head, and why? Because he knows you. He knows where you're susceptible. And even more so, God. Huh? God knows us fully and completely. The devil only knows us by observation. He observes certain things and comes to certain conclusions. But God actually knows us. So if he were to tempt us, there'd be no way out. Right? So no, he never tempted Adam and Eve. Right? He's not even present there.
The devil does not.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
That he's not even present. So yeah.
There's something with the free will, like the temptation, and
Mhm.
that would be where God gives us the free will to decide: are we going to tempt? Are we going to do the evil? Or are we going to do what God wants us to do? But He gives us His choice.
Yeah.
God, a very justified God.
Yeah. Well, even if further into the book of Joshua, at the end of the book of Joshua, he says, God has set before you life and death. I set before you this day life and death. Choose life that you and your children may live. Choose the good thing. Choose it. But you got to choose it. God sent Jesus, but you have to choose. Am I going to submit and believe, or am I going to reject? When Jesus was manifest, he came. The Bible says he came to his own, and his own received him not. They rejected him. The Jews, right? He came to them. They saw light, and they said, "We don't like light. We love darkness." And that's what he said. Because they loved darkness, they did not choose the light. So it's a matter of love. It goes right back to what we're talking about, this whole idea. And this is the thing about being a human being. It's a responsible thing. Animals don't have this. I'm sorry, they just don't have this. Yes?
I was just thinking, one of the verses that kind of helped me kind of understand the connection between testing is when God says, "If you love me, you will obey me." And over again, I believe it's in John,
Yeah.
several times, or in a few chapters, he talks about the connection between love and obedience.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about testing, he's not testing us to see if we're gonna fall. He's testing us so, one, he knows our heart, that we truly love him because we say we love him, but when we actually act it out by obeying the laws that he's given, we are demonstrating our love. Right? And so that really helped me kind of understand it a little bit. I hope maybe that'll help.
That's good. Yeah, it's kind of like if you make steel, right? There's different grades of steel, you know, and they make it. They can support certain weights, for example, and they'll take a piece of steel and they'll do what? They'll put it into a machine and they test it to see if it, and they even use the terminology, is it true? In other words, is it true to the formula that we made it, or is it going to break when it's under stress? So that's a test, right? Am I going to break under stress? The stress of what? Temptation. Which creates a test that I need to pass. Adam and Eve didn't pass it. And that's how we got to where we are today, in a world, like I was talking about earlier, of complexity, where we know that there is good. We know it. We know that there is some good inside of us. But we also know and are aware of this other part that, if not for the grace of God, we would have ended up where somebody of less reputation has ended up. We're all capable of doing things that we would not want to acknowledge that we're capable of doing.
That's right.
We're capable of doing evil. My gosh. Some of the things that we're, oh my God, how could I think on that stuff? And we even astound ourselves. You know? So we look at this life and sometimes it's very confusing. But then when we look at just these basic things that we've looked at today, just in the first chapter of Genesis, understanding that God created us in his image and in his likeness, it clears the air. It gives us an understanding. When we understand that we had a commandment that he broke, and God told him, if you break this command, you're going to die. Well, it opened Pandora's box. It opened the box of evil to the unknown. And now we have what we have, and we have to deal with it. It's the present reality, right? And then that, you know, if you look at it, even in that, in all the brokenness, you have immediately God giving hope. Hope turns into the story of what? Redemption. Right at the beginning, God says, I'm going to crush him one day, and I'm going to take back what's mine. So there's hope. Right at the beginning. Right at the beginning. Any other quick question? All set for tonight? Okay. Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to hear your word, listen to your word, think through, Lord God, what the text means, Lord, and learn, Father, to apply these things in our lives, especially in those times, Lord, when we get into confusing moments, perplexities where we don't understand. So, Father, knowing that you are good and that you have created good and that you are working always for our good, we have a firm foundation in the midst of all the confusion, Father. And you keep us have initiated throughout history from the very beginning, Father God. And we know and are confident that it will end back in the garden, Father. It will end in the New Jerusalem. It will end, Father, and there will be everlasting peace and joy. So we thank you for it, for guiding us, leading us, directing us, and opening our eyes to see the playing field that's before us. In Jesus' name. Praise God.